Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Q&A, the live Q&A for our film, An Honest Liar, which is, we're thrilled to have on The Realist, and we're here with the co-directors, Tyler Measom and Justin Weinstein. And it is an amazing film in that it was made 10 years ago or so, maybe a touch more even. And the themes and the things that it brings up are more relevant now than ever. It is, on its surface, the story of James Randi, the amazing Randi, a very well-known magician, and ultimately truth teller. And that, without giving away too much, is a really interesting premise for a film. So, Tyler, Justin, thank you for being here. Welcome.
We love this film. We slaved over making this film for many years, and to know that people still want to see it means the world to us.
So, for those who don't know, I mean, a lot of times people think of directors as sort of singular when they think about a film. For co-directors, how have you guys known each other? Or how did you get to know each other, and how did you work together?
Oddly enough, I wanted to make this film about James the Amazing Randi. I knew very little about him when I started the process, and I happened to meet Justin at a film festival. I was there with a film called Sons of Perdition, and Justin, you were there with?
Elmo.
Right. And I just mentioned I'm thinking of making a film on this guy, and Justin knew about it. And we literally went to dinner. We'd known each other a couple of hours, and at the end I was just like, to hell with it, let's make this together. and that became a journey of us for the next, 4+ years, making, preparing, finishing, and promoting the film. So it worked out really well, both artistically, and we became good friends, and we were lucky. It was very lucky.
Yeah. So, Justin, what's your background again? Being Elmo, I'm thinking, is the Muppet?
Yes, the Muppet, and that was a documentary that I co-wrote and edited that went to Sundance, which is about the 200-pound black man who created and voiced Elmo, and most people are not familiar with the man behind the Muppet. And so I was doing the festival circuit with that film when Tyler was doing the circuit with Sons of Perdition. And he mentioned James Randi to me, and we both had a connection for different reasons. Mine is I had been a scientist as well as a filmmaker, and the idea of truth and empirical knowledge was really important to me. And being educated in how to think, I believe, is something that is a big problem in this country. And Tyler grew up in a very different environment. I'm an East Coast, Reformed Jew, and Tyler is from Utah.
That gives it away when you say I'm from Utah. I played
Enough said.
jazz. No, I was raised as a Mormon and consequently left the faith. And a lot of my work before that time and consequently since has dealt with belief and religion and faith and why people believe certain things that can be relatively easily proven to be false, and why they continue to believe those things.
Right. And Tyler, your background?
Oh, like I said, I was a Mormon, and that was part of, this was very much along those lines of that belief system of why filmmakers or why individuals continue to believe certain things. So it worked out nicely.
Yeah. So I think that probably answers my next question, which was, okay, James Randi was a known figure. He, was a reasonably well-known magician, and was the initial premise to make a story, a biopic, so to speak, of a man, or was it to talk about truth and belief and the things that you alluded to earlier?
Well, Tyler, I'll let you describe the initial vision for the film, which I bought into and I thought was great.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it was hard to, obviously when you make a documentary, you hope it goes one way, and then you're opening yourself up for anything that happens, especially as you're following a subject, who's alive, and as you continue to follow him. But we definitely wanted to use the tricks of magic that James Randi does and play that on the audience a little bit. So that was always something that Justin and I wanted to do. How can we use the same beliefs that James Randi has to fool the audience, or to play a trick on the audience, or make the audience question? The first time I met James Randi, I flew out to Florida with the intent, and this was prior to meeting Justin, with the intent of making a documentary on him. And I sat down to dinner with him, or lunch, and he said, I will do this under one condition, and that is warts and all. You have to tell all of the story of me. And that was refreshing to hear that. And he stood by that throughout the process of making the movie.
And so that's what you bought into, Justin?
Well, there were a number of ideas about what aspect of the story was most important. And something that we were both fascinated with was how big a following he had. There's a skeptic movement, and that whole that group, the interests, the kind of sociology there, it's an interesting crowd. But soon after seeing how he taught people, which was by fooling them, showing them how they could be fooled, we kind of adopted this idea that, well, we want our film to, be an example of the way that his philosophy works for educating people, or for deceiving them and, letting them know that they've been deceived, but in an entertaining way. And so that kind of became our mission for what we wanted to achieve.
It's definitely interesting turf in the format of documentary storytelling. Is it also dangerous turf to be playing with truth in this genre?
Well, yeah. I mean, documentaries are always supposed to be truthful, and they're journalistic, but they're also entertainment. And and that's kind of the ploy we used against it, is that audiences are used to watching a documentary and believing everything that is said in a documentary. And we use that ploy in some ways against the audience. Now, we definitely didn't mislead, nor did we manipulate in any way. All of the things you see in there are true. But by setting it up that documentaries can be false, or we kind of entertained the audience in some ways. We pulled the rug out from under them later when the reveal happened, or when Randi talked about not being, what did he say? I would not be a part of this documentary if you use this footage. Paraphrasing, of course.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think about documentaries as, well, contrary to just being entertainment, often it's educational. And Randi and his philosophy was, I want to be entertaining in the course of telling a story. And the story is a true story, or maybe it's a lie, but it's a story, and I'm going to lead you along this path. And his life is, is that in a lot of ways. And he, the stories that he could tell that were maybe real, there's a lot that we couldn't include in the film. Things that were legendary stories about deceptions. but there's like an element of, could that really happen? Did that really happen? And that's something fun to entertain when you're telling a story. How much of this is true? And it's not often that a documentary can play with that. A number of them have. We're not the only one. You know, it's not totally unique. But James, his life was a perfect vehicle for that, and magic as well as Orson Welles and F is for Fake was an inspiration for us in this.
Yeah, I wondered if either of you had a background in magic at all.
No. Other than watching it at birthday parties when I was a kid. I think we're all entertained by magic. I think what I learned by being around magicians and making this film and really studying more of magic is magicians really do tell a story. Every single trick is a story. It's a 3-act structure in and of itself. I'm going to do this, and then there's that part where they go, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this rabbit out of my hat. It may not work. So the audience is hanging on that, and of course, they do the old switcheroo, and it's not the rabbit that pulls out of the hat, it's the hat disappears or whatever it may be. And that's a really good storytelling and pre-production and how they can keep secrets. How long can you keep a secret until the audience absolutely has to know? How long can you hold that suspense? And that's true in magic or filmmaking. And that's something that Justin and I really wanted to do. How long can we maintain this secret until we absolutely have to reveal it or not reveal it?
Yeah, it is one of the part of the fun of the big tricks of filmmaking, right? Is to be able to hold the tension line, and you learn things that maybe on the first day of shooting, but in the film you may not reveal it until the beginning of the third act or something.
It's a selective release of information based on your idea of how best to tell a story. And that's also what magicians do. And hopefully the reveal comes at the right time and is powerful enough to be a good payoff.
Yeah. The audience does expect it, whether they consciously know it or not. You're hoping for it. Anytime you invest that much time. For documentary filmmakers, do you think it's in some ways an advantage? No matter what your subject, here it's magic, but it could be anything. It could be medicine. It could be anything. To not know a lot about the topic that you're actually exploring, so that it becomes a discovery process.
Yes and no. My answer is, I always want to know as much as I can about something, but I will not feign ignorance, but I won't reveal the fact that I know as much as I do, because people want to explain things. You want to tease out the story, and if you reveal the fact that you never know all the aspects, then the person telling the story isn't going to tell it the same way.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't know anything about James Randi when I started this. I barely knew his name when I started this film. Consequently, we learned a great deal about it. I mean, we knew everything about a man's life. And I've done that with other films. When I started a film called I Want My MTV, I had probably watched, 5 hours of MTV in my entire life. And then I knew everything there was about it after the course of 2 years. So I think it helps to not know too much on the onset and then know everything you absolutely can. But when you're telling the story to an audience, in many ways, you have to assume that they don't know anything either. So don't make assumptions that they know who James Randi is or how important he is or how big of a deal he is. Lead them along. And then also, they only know what you need them to know. How little. It's very important in making a documentary to not overwhelm them, to not give the audience too much. Because if you give them a piece of information in the first act, you'd better follow it up in the third act. So with this, we had a man's career and incidents that were happening at the time in the verite, and we had to really figure out, more importantly, not what not to tell, what to tell. More importantly than what to tell was what not to tell. What should we not put on the screen? And that was the hardest part of making this film, is pulling things out.
With the things that you guys have talked about, so this idea of truth and what you reveal and what you don't. As filmmakers, there's a sense of controlling that, and yet, as you said, magicians are master storytellers, and so when James sets you up by saying warts and all, is that the ultimate fake? So as you were getting to know him and work with him, what was your sensibility about how much he was giving you, or was he holding back?
Well, let me say there are a lot of warts that are not in the film, and some of this is infamous backstory, or at least within certain circles. I mean, his battles with Uri Geller got pretty messy, and there were some real kind of scandals being batted back and forth, but that wasn't what was important in the scope of his life. If we just wanted to be salacious, there were other things we could have focused on, but that wasn't our interest, and he trusted us that wasn't our interest. He knew from talking to us and our backgrounds, and I think he had been approached by other people before Tyler came along, and for him, I think it was very important that he trusts who he's working with, and does it fully, because we had his archives. He revealed a lot of personal stuff to us, but I think we shared in a relationship with him that was very meaningful.
Yeah. He, James Randi is an entertainer. He spent his life being the amazing Randy and being on, and for the cameras and for the crowd. And when we would go over and we'd pull out the camera, and mind you, we did it a lot. We filmed him a lot. We followed him around LA. We followed him around Europe. We followed him everywhere we did it. We were at his house all the time. Initially he was on. We pulled out the cameras and he was on. He was telling a joke. He was being funny. He was being the amazing Randy. But after being there for so long, he started to show signs of James Randi. And that's what we were able to catch. And that, I think, is what is missing in many ways from contemporary documentary filmmaking, is filmmakers, for whatever reason, maybe it's budget or because the network won't allow them to, they're not allowed to hang around a subject long enough to really get to know them. When you go over to someone's house the first time, they clean up. When you go over to someone's house the 20th time, they don't care. They'll leave the mess out. And I think that's important to get there. And we were able to get there with James Randi.
Yeah. It's when you say you had his archives, what was his archives?
Well, he had founded the James Randi Educational Foundation in, I don't know what year. Well, it started with the Skeptic Society, or it was Martin Gardner, Isaac Asimov. He was involved with a group of intellectuals in creating a movement that was truth-based to combat the misinformation and disinformation that they thought was kind of ruining our world. And so the papers go back quite a ways, articles, but then he started his career practically in vaudeville times, right? Like he he ran away from home and joined the circus, and so that goes back to like the 40s, and so he had a very large, well-documented, but not well-organized archive of photos, articles, newspaper clippings,
VHS tapes. He recorded everything. Every time he was
not
on
just
TV.
VHS, stacks of VHS tapes, but things in all kinds of medias, right? From different periods of time. And so there's a huge historical and archival element to this, which also I think gives the story, a depth, a richness, because it's also cultural when you see these clips of him, on Johnny Carson or on, the different talk shows and Uri Geller. It brings you back. This is part of, there was a time when people were actually trying to bend spoons with their minds. Not that there are just as crazy things going on now, but 20 years from now, it might seem like spoon bending. Or 40 years from now, 50 years from now. It's been a while. So, yeah, huge archives. And that took a lot of time for us, but was really enjoyable.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the other thing that the archive gives you is a certain pace. There's so much of it that you're able to edit at a really interesting pace. Not too fast, but fast enough to certainly not be bogged down as some historical documentaries are.
True.
Using archival is a really good way to do exposition in a film. Rather than someone telling you, you can use a news clip, you can use a piece of footage that really compresses the story in a quick way, because that's usually what television does. So that was very helpful in telling the story.
But there were discoveries that we made, things that hadn't been seen in a long time, that enabled us to tell the stories. Like we had thought initially we would have to do some recreations. But I mean, first of all, the him being serenaded, hanging in a straitjacket upside down. As soon as we found that piece of tape, we were like, "That's our opening. That's the opening sequence."
Unedited,
unedited. But there were VHS tapes that they shot during the Popov, the whole faith healer thing that nobody had seen, behind the scenes of them doing that. And without that footage, being able to tell the story wouldn't have had the same impact. You're actually seeing what's happening. So it's not just, shorthand. In our case, it enabled us to, round out and fully tell some of these great episodes in his life.
Was that the bulk of the archival work, or was there other searching and tracking down that you had to do?
We were looking for other materials through, news entities, networks, photo places. But I'll tell you, we had riches as far as archival went. We had, again, James Randi would tape things. He'd be on TV and then he'd tape them. And I'll tell you what he'd also do. He would know that Uri Geller is going to be on the show People Are Talking. So he'd record that. And then we would look through his archive and we could literally find a letter that he wrote to People Are Talking, dated the same day or the same next day, basically saying, you had Uri Geller on your show. I'd like to come on and show you how he bent the spoon that he bent on your show. And then a week later, he'd be on People Are Talking. And he'd record that one. So we just had, we had notes and papers and birth certificates and tax forms. We had boxes of this stuff that was...
diagrams of old escape routines that he did. Getting out of a jail, really wonderful stuff. Although there were definitely tricks that he did and that some of the mentalists did, the people that we met, that are still incomprehensible to me. And that is something that's really important, that even though Tyler and I are, relatively sophisticated now after having spent all this time looking at magic, the mentalists can do tricks that make it seem like they're reading your mind. And you just can't figure out how they're doing it. And so we know how powerful that is, and how it can make you believe in something. It's like a miracle.
I assume at some point you had to make a decision. The old, a magician never reveals his tricks. So were you as filmmakers going to reveal a trick or not?
There were some instances. For example, in the Alpha Project, there was a moment when the two guys were able to turn the fan that was over the glass, if you remember it. And we knew how they did that. And they told us how we did that. They did that. But that was one where we consciously said, we're not going to tell the audience. We're not going to let them know. And I can't tell you how many times in Q&As people would be like, how did they do it? How did they do that? And we tell them then, and we'll tell you now, they simply blew it. They blew. They just found there was a groove under the glass went onto a board, and there was a
bell jar.
Yeah, it went under, it was like a notch. And if they simply blew, it would go underneath it. But that's one where we just said, we don't want the audience to know. Let's keep a few secrets for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. We did learn, without him showing us, how he did the rope trick when he has somebody tie his hands behind his back and then like instantaneously gets out of it. And what else?
Well, the funny thing is we had it was like a 1950s or 60s TV show, and I remember it was black and white, and we had the video, and it looked good, and we were able to just slow it down step by step by step, which of course in the 1950s, no one would imagine that you would be able to do that. And I think that's probably why you don't see too many spoon benders right now, because people are able to slow it down, stop it, and figure out how to do it. You just don't see it like we did in the 70s.
So, you mentioned Uri Geller. What was the process of figuring out? James Randi had a few people he antagonized. Who was going to be your antagonist within this film? And then how do you get them to commit to coming to talk with you?
Well, first there was no question. Uri Geller and James Randi had a decades-long running feud, or multi-decade, like throughout their careers. So there wasn't any question who represented magic gone bad. Who used the same tools for the reasons that Randi hated, which was to deceive as opposed to entertain. No question about that.
Yeah, and Geller was good at it. It wasn't, Randi defeated so-and-so, defeated Popov. There's that guy early in the film where he puts the popcorn down and he couldn't blow the pages. Defeated. But Geller just kept going and going, and for every superhero, there's a villain, the same kind of magic powers. And so this was an easy one to keep, and it wasn't. We didn't make it. We didn't manipulate that. This was an ongoing process, and to be honest with you, we showed only a scant portion of the ugliness that was between those two.
And what about how we got him?
Go ahead.
On camera.
You can say that.
No, you.
Oh, what's funny? Initially we reached out to Uri Geller and we said, we'd like you to be part of this film. And he said, as you know, Randi and I have a very difficult relationship, and
his lawyer responded.
They've had lawsuits over the years. And
the lawyer responded to us.
Yeah, and then Jess and I were back and forth, like, what should we do? How should we convince him? What should we say? And then basically we always remembered what James Randi said, which is, the most dangerous place you can be is between Uri Geller and a camera. So we essentially sent him an email that said, you know what, it's fine. We have lots of people talking about you. James Randi talks about Uri Geller all the time. We don't need you. And instantaneously, he wrote back and said, yes, I'd like to be a part of it. So the minute we said we didn't want him, he wanted to be in it. And we flew out. We flew out to England. He gave us a tour of his very beautiful home. He had a car that was covered with bent spoons. Thousands of bent spoons were like glued onto this. I think it was a Rolls Royce. I forget.
No, a 70s Cadillac.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Black
he was
70s Cadillac.
Insanely kind, very nice, overwhelmingly nice to us. And he told his side of the story.
Surprises in that for you guys?
You know, I think it was a little bit bizarre for both Tyler and myself to meet him in person after having witnessed kind of secondhand through all the archival and through Randi and through the writings and through the articles, you know, who he was beginning, you know, with his experiments at the Stanford Research Institute where he convinced these guys that, you know, he had these powers. And so it was like he still had not ever said that he was a magician. He still has never said that he doesn't have, you know, powers. And so, you know, it was just, it was a little bit surreal because his house is modeled after the White House. Like the American White House, but it's in the British countryside. And he has all, he bends spoons for us, of course. But yeah, no, it was fascinating for us to see finally that side of it. And he enjoyed it. He had a ball. We all did. It was fun.
Does he sleep in the Oval Office?
He didn't show us his bedroom, but he did have a couch that he claimed Michael Jackson had slept on. Sorry, I'll leave that there.
Right. Well, we just want to pause for a second, and for the audience, Honest Liar and a lot of really, really fine documentaries are on The Realist, which is what we're about, is showing great independent films and trying to make sure that independent filmmakers are supported, because it's become a much more difficult way to live your life, even though it's incredibly important that you get to hear these stories, and that filmmakers like Justin and Tyler will take the risk to do it. So if you want to sign up, it's free for the first 2 months. Check it out. Check out the films. You can sign up there on the website, or you can also go to our link tree, which has got all our socials on there. And it's really important for us as a new startup to have followers and to be able to spread the word. And so please give us a follow if you would. That'd be great. Thanks. So in the world of magic, you guys also booked some really interesting people, and how was the response from? Well, I guess first of all, what was the interaction like with, say, Penn and Teller, and then ultimately once the film came out, the response of the magic community?
You know, we Penn and Teller are very important to James Randi, and James Randi is insanely important to Penn and Teller. So we naturally knew they had to be in the film, and it took a little while for us to get them and to be able to sit down with them. Now, maybe a week before we interviewed them, Justin had heard a radio show where Teller spoke, and he told great stories, and he was smart and he was articulate, and so we assumed, well, he'd be able to speak, he'd be able to sit down and talk to us. And then when we met them and he sat down and we asked a question, Penn said, no, if he's on camera or if he's live, he doesn't speak. So we had to kind of shift that, the thinking that he would be able to answer questions. And I thought that was strange. I mean, did he agree with everything that Penn was saying as he sat next to him and nodded? But they were a great part of the film and very supportive of the film. And again, Randy loves that, and they love Randy.
Yeah, Randy was kind of he was a big influence in their career because they also play with magic and showing how tricks are done or exposing things. I mean, their show on, was it Showtime, called Bullshit?
Yeah.
It was kind of, very much in the same vein. So, I think that it was, if anything, difficult because he was so important to them. And I think they, were maybe worried about what we might be doing with his legacy. But they were very nice and very thoughtful. Of course, Penn, he understands where Randy comes from. He knows what he grappled with, and he, kind of on an intellectual level, he's right there with the history and, the philosophy behind what they do. So they were really great.
Did the wider community of magicians and people involved in illusion enjoy the film, or was there a portion that was like, I don't know that we need to be exposing all our warts?
I think we gave too much away with the magicians. I've yet to hear any of them not like the film in any way. I think everyone appreciated the movie. And again, any publicity that magic can get, they will take it. So they were very welcoming of it. We filmed the interview with James Randi, the main interview, and in the very beginning of the film, as he's walking through, we filmed that at the Magic Castle. So they were obviously very supportive of James Randi and the film.
You say you spent a lot of time, with him. How many times would you guess that you interviewed James?
I don't know.
Interviewed? I mean, sit-down interview or just like talking on camera?
Yeah, interviews pop
probably
up.
Like maybe 5 or 6 sit-down interviews in various places at various times.
Yeah.
But then, I filmed dozens of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many.
I can't.
So many.
I have to go back and look.
And look.
Luckily, we're not. It's not film that costs money. It's bits.
Yeah.
So you got a lot of the.
Yeah.
You know what?
Well,
we loved hanging out with him, and he loved hanging out with us, and we loved Davey. We enjoyed being down there. We enjoyed being with them. And then after the film, and it premiered, they would travel the film festival circuit with us. And James Randi, we must have shown this film with him, I don't know, Justin, what do you say? Like when he was in the attendance, maybe 25 times? And
at least.
We showed it hundreds, but where he was there, and every single time he sat and watched the movie, and we'd be there for the first 3 minutes, we'd intro the film, and then we'd go get lunch or dinner or a drink, and James Randi would sit and watch every single time. And I asked him, I was like, "You're going to watch it again?" And he goes, "I see something different in it every time." So,
yeah, that's very special. And for those who don't make films, it's I get the question sometimes. Why did you talk with so and so many times? Why did you? You clearly have 5, 6, 7, 10 different sort of setups where you're talking in an interview sort of style. Why do that?
Well, a number of reasons. First of all, with Randy specifically, his history is so deep, and there are so many stories, and there are so many things to explore that you just can't do it all at once. In fact, the main interview that we shot at the Magic Castle, Oh, we did for, I don't know, what, 4 days, 5
It was
days?
3 days, yeah. 3 days
3
in
days.
LA.
Okay. And we didn't cover everything we needed to. And part of that is because he's such a great storyteller. Part of that is because he has so many stories to tell. And part of that is we love talking to him. It was just fascinating. And then part of that is we're going to figure out what's going to end up in the film and what the stories are going to be. And the more material we have, and luckily with him, like everything is good. He's just good. He's a good storyteller. So, you know, it's not, there's not a lot of fluff. It's not like we're trying to just, here's a 5-minute story that you have this part to tell. We had other characters filling out different parts of it. But yeah, no, too much history. And there's a lot on the edit room floor that we use for, you know, other stuff, other shorts, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So for 3 days, there was 3-hour sessions, 4-hour sessions.
I think they were pushing 5, 6. I mean, he was an older man, and you know he couldn't. You know, it did get a little tiring for him after 5 or so hours, and we needed to keep him sharp. But you know, we kept coming back. We kept coming back and coming back and coming back, and he was happy to do it. There was never a complaint about, "Hey, James, we're coming down in a week to film you. Are you okay with that?" He was always okay with it.
Yeah, that's great. So, and also in your cast of characters, I didn't know the story, so I wasn't expecting to see Alice Cooper show up. But can you talk about, you know, again, that's an interesting booking, and then you know the kind of the vibe of Cooper and Randy.
Yeah, very different people, James Randi and Alice Cooper, one would think. But they were very close. And they were, you know, when we asked Alice Cooper if he'd want to be a part of it, he said, anything for James Randi. We went down and filmed Alice in his restaurant. He owns a restaurant in Phoenix. And he's a big golf fan. And there was a TV just out of his view that had golf on it. And he would keep one eye on the golf and one eye on us. And then immediately after it was done, he'd look at the golf while we asked him a question, then he'd answer, and then he'd look at the golf. And then, but he was great. He was wonderful and fun.
Yeah, I think he felt as though, you know, Randy contributed a lot to that period of his career with the stage show. And I think they had a lot of fun together. Even though Alice Cooper is religious in ways that Randy is not, that never got between them, apparently.
And do you know, similar to Penn and Teller in the magic community, sort of did once Cooper saw the film, was it what he'd hoped?
Yeah. You see? We've never heard if he had seen it or not, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think he tweeted about it, maybe. But yeah, good question. We didn't get to screen it for him personally.
Still time. If Alice Cooper wants to watch it in The Realist, he's more than welcome.
We'll let him know.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll get him a pass. You guys mentioned a while back. You mentioned and you know it's in the trailer very prominently that you know James said if I'm not sure if I want you to use this footage of the film. Later you'll come back and say, of course, he did approve it. But was there a time of a little bit of anxiety as filmmakers that he was gonna, for a particularly revealing part of his life, maybe not have you included or want you to include it?
Well, that was getting a little dicey when things happened with Davey, when his partner was picked up and locked away in immigration, he was really worried about what was going to happen and was reluctant to kind of share that with us, even though, I mean, actually, I think I was scheduled to fly down to film with him the next day, and he called me up and said, "I'm sorry, I can't do it. We've got to cancel it. I'll let you know why soon." And it was that day that his partner was arrested. But other than that, eventually, I think they saw that they could trust us and had to be public about it, but trusted us to be there behind the scenes. But when it came to that part where he doesn't want it to be in the film, we were nervous when we first, had that cut, which we believed in. We really felt like we got over a major hurdle to get it right. And we were nervous to show it to him. And in fact, initially he was, I would say, on the fence and needed to think about it. So it wasn't an immediate, like, yes, that's fine. It did take him some reflection before, and some convincing on our part that it was for the right reasons. But then after that, whenever we'd screen it and people would ask him about it, he'd say, "I demanded that they keep that in the film." I made sure they kept that. He was very proud of it. And he said that he was happy, he was glad that we showed him being human.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for the audience, again, who may not make films, how often do you wind up showing the subject, the film, sort of in advance? Is it, purely for sort of fact-checking purposes? Is it that you have to have the approval? Is that you like the approval, but, if there's a disconnect, the filmmaker is making the film? How does that process work?
Well, it's never the same. It always depends on the kind of film, the kind of agreements, who the subject is, whether it's one of what are now common, which are kind of biopics that are just as much publicity as anything else. There's an implicit pact that, nothing embarrassing or too bad is going to be shown. But so it really varies. Most of the time, documentary filmmakers do not agree to let a subject influence the final cut. Like that kind of needs to be the starting point. Like, you have to trust us. You can't say, take this out, leave that in. You can ask us. We can have a discussion about it. But we have to have final cut. But so, Tyler, I don't know. You've had different experiences, though. We've all had.
I found that showing rough cuts to people, 9 times out of 10, they don't understand what a rough cut really means. They don't understand that they're watching a movie that will eventually get polished and will look better and sound better, and that we can cut it back, and that it's ungraded and all the other stuff. So it's like walking through a house that just has drywall on. So they don't really necessarily understand it. Probably even more difficult than that. I remember the first rough cut screening we did with Randy was a little painful. It was difficult. He didn't really understand it, and he didn't really get it. And I remember his corrections were factual things, like we got a date wrong. It was very strange. If I can avoid showing it to individuals, I will. But also, I think it's important to make sure that the subjects like the film, and that's always something in our minds when we're making the film. Will they appreciate what we've done? Are we being truthful with our story? Because this is a human being's life, and it's entrusted in our hands. And we knew we were the only ones that was going to tell the James Randi story. And thank God somebody did, because it's a great story. And that's something that you respect. You don't take lightly when you're telling the story of someone's life. And we certainly didn't when we did this film.
You couldn't have known when you were doing it how continually resonant the main themes would become over the course of time, right? So what we experience now, there are threads. You mentioned, immigration. There's an immigration element to this. There is, and the core of it is about deception, skepticism, and revealing, at least an attempt to reveal truth against deception. And then, to me, what was the most revealing was, do we even care? That we know we're being deceived, and we'll allow it. As you've watched this film and time wash over it, and it become even more salient, I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
Every time we show this film, everyone says, "Oh, this is an important time for this film because we're seeing more and more people being dishonest." And when the film came out, they're like, "Everyone's lying and no one's telling the truth, and it's a very important this time for this film." And that was 10 years ago. We're seeing it more and more. So, look, there's always been snakes in the grass. There's always been snake oil salesmen ready to deceive, whether they be one individual, a group, or an entire government. So what we're seeing in today's era, I think, is more dangerous than it's ever been. I'm sad that James Randi isn't around to fight it in any way in his small manner. I don't know how he'd feel about seeing everything he's seeing in today's world. Unhappy, I would imagine.
He was pretty angry about the situation before he left.
Oh yeah.
I think his lesson, which is the film's lesson, or the film's lesson, which is his lesson, is more resonant in terms of, get to the bottom of it. Don't believe everything you see or hear. If it's too good to be true, it sounds too good to be true, it is. But also his conclusion that people want to be fooled. A lot of people, they know it's a lie, but they want to believe in the lie. And that can be very destructive. I think his philosophy of not doing this through writing, or not doing it through teaching a class, but doing it through, his magic and storytelling is also important, because people don't want to be told this person is lying to you, that person is lying to you. But if you tell them, hey, you're being lied to, and let me show you how, and you're going to have fun in the process, and maybe you'll think a little deeper about, something somebody tells you. I think, that's evergreen.
Mm-hmm. So with all the material that you had, archival, original, what was your edit process? Were you guys editing yourselves? Did you have an editor? And how long did that take to condense?
We had an editor, Greg O'Toole, a great editor, lives in Oakland, and we brought him on when we were ready for post. Now, Justin and I had done a lot of preparation for bringing him on. We've done a lot of story thinking. We figured it out, hopefully, what we wanted to do. But editing this film was very, very, very difficult. It was one of the probably the most difficult film I've made. I've made what, 8, 9, 10 now, something like that. It was easily the most difficult post. Justin and I did a lot of editing ourselves. Sometimes we take a scene and we'd edit it and pile it all in. But most of it was A, a wealth of archival, B, a great, big, huge story, but C, more importantly, was how can we, where do we tell all these stories? Where do we tell the story of Davy as a mentalist? What was he called? What was his name again? Carlos. When do we tell that story? When do we put that? And when do we put the arrest? And when do we put, the Alpha Project? Where do we move these things around? And how can we tightly compress the story? It was a lot of work, but I'll tell you, when we were fortunate in that we made this independently, and there was no one to tell us, you're done editing. This has to be on air in July. Because we just kept editing and kept editing and kept editing until we knew it was perfect. And then I think we went back in and kept editing after we premiered it. We did. We went back in and edited some more. And I bet if we watched it now, we'd probably edit it even more. But we did everything until we knew it was exact. And that's the thing that Justin and I didn't know this when I had dinner with him at a film festival. We made sure that everything was perfect. Every moment, every clip, every piece of audio, every piece of music before it went out. And I think you have to do that. To rise above the fray, you really have to make sure everything is perfect. And we did, I hope.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said you made it independently, and I guess from both of your perspectives, why is that important as a part of this art form, to be able to do it independently? Because and maybe explain what some of the compromises are if you're forced to not do it independently.
Well, if you're doing something that is contracted for broadcast, or is being funded by interested parties, then and you don't have final cut, then ultimately you're working to tell a story, but it can't be the story you want to tell. It has to be within the bounds of somebody else's judgment, and there are going to be compromises, even if you think something is really amazing and an important part of the story. If they feel that it doesn't represent their client well, or whatever the considerations are, you're beholden to other interests. And unfortunately, economically, it's hard to make documentaries it's hard to make independent documentaries and get the funding for them. So most of what you see is not as free for the film.
Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I think what we're seeing today is a lot of documentaries are starting to look the same. And I'm not bemoaning Netflix when I say this, but a lot of their documentaries that they do in-house or commission, they kind of look the same. They hire the same few directors. HBO's are starting, well, HBO's a little different. Hulu's kind of look the same. They all start to kind of feel like a brand. This is the Netflix brand, and we don't really stray too far from it. This is the Apple brand, and we don't stray too far from it. And we didn't have those limitations. We were able to make a story that we wanted to make. And I think that's the beautiful thing about what you're doing with The Realist, is you're taking stories that are different, that feel different, that look different, that sound different, and tell different kind of stories, be they a verite film or a historical film, and allowing individuals the freedom to make the film they want to make, versus this is how Netflix makes a movie. So it saddens me that we're not seeing the films that we used to see 10 years ago. I think they've gotten a little more generic, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's, they're
commodities. By algorithm.
Yeah.
It's very true. I see independent filmmakers as artists, and so it's a free expression of the way that a filmmaker perceives a subject or a story. I've done a lot of the contract documentaries as well, and we always felt that a really good one in terms from an artistic point of view, if you got 80% of what you would hoped to get in there, that was an extraordinary win. Usually it was much less, and so I think being able to see your vision, your combined visions in this one, which makes it even more interesting, kind of come to life, and know the film and the story that you wanted collaboratively. That's even better.
Well, documentaries are by nature collaborative. I mean, in general, you work with a team. But yeah, no, it's great to have a partner on a project that you trust, that hopefully you see the same way, that you see things the same way, and if you don't, you can hash them out until you both agree this is what's best. So I always love collaborating on films, and Tyler definitely is a great collaborator as well.
Eight films I co-directed with different directors, and it's kind of nice. I mean, I'll tell you, with Justin and I, not only was it a creative collaboration, but because it took so long, sometimes you just needed somebody to be like, we gotta fucking film, we gotta go do this, let's go and someone to keep pushing, and then it was my turn to push, and then I took the role as a producer this week, and he took the role of the producer the next week, because by and large, it was just us. It really was just us through the course of the entire filmmaking. And that includes the fundraising, and that includes we had a very successful Kickstarter campaign, and that included the hiring of everyone. It was just us, which you don't get that often anymore, And that means we're beholden to no one. No one really told us who to film or when to film or what to film. Just us, by and large. And it was really nice. It was a really, really nice experience making this film. Just bootstrapping and continuing to do it whenever we could. It was really nice.
It's an experience I think every filmmaker should have, but it's very difficult to achieve.
Yeah, it takes guts, and you guys did it well. So bravo to both of you, and thank you both for sharing the time with us and sharing the film with us, and can't wait to see what's next from each of you. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having the film. We appreciate the audience watching it. Really, it means a lot. And Randy would be ecstatic to know that it's still out there and people are still loving the movie.